Found alive 18 years after being abducted at the age of 11. Well, joining us now is former police detective and specialist in child abduction cases, Mark Williams-Thomas. Mark, thanks for coming in again. This is extraordinary because we, from history, I think probably have learnt the lesson that if they disappear, that's it, they've been killed.
Absolutely, amazing case, to come back and be found 18 years later. The states have got a couple of other cases, and in fact other countries. We've got Elizabeth Smart, who was obviously recovered. We've got Natasha Kampusch. Both of the significance of that in this case is the age of the child when they were abducted.
Yeah.
To abduct a child when they're over 9, the chances of them being found are far greater than if you're younger than 5, because the resistance is there. As a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, and in this case, you can reason with the offender, you can talk to the offender, and you tend to build this bond. Whereas if you're much younger, and of course we all remember Madeleine McCann case, the chances are far less that that child is going to be recovered.
But again, the extraordinary, yet to find the details, but a wife involved, held actually at the family home, even though it was in a compound.
Yeah.
I mean, raising again, I guess, the question about the so-called Stockholm syndrome. Why didn't she try to escape? Why didn't she try to raise the alarm?
Well, it's power and control, and obviously there's been a greater element as far as the sexual abuse that's taken place, but it's very much about power and control. I think what's really important in this is the close proximity that they were. This is only about 130, 180 miles away from actually where the child was abducted. So we're actually still talking in a very relatively close area. And of course this offender had a previous conviction for offences against children, and indeed abductions as well.
Which is what raised the alarm with the police.
Absolutely. Great piece of police work. And your criticism starts to come into police, say, hang on a minute, why didn't you know that this person was there? Don't forget, these are very controlled, manipulative individuals. It's about making sure that their pretense is to all intents and purposes, honourable. So those members of the public out there will be thinking, well, hang on, this is a person, they might be a bit strange, but carries on a normal life and didn't raise any concerns, because if it had done, the probation officers or parole officers would have gone in.
Yeah, and Fritzl's slightly different because it was the family connection, but this ability, it seems, for these people to cut off two parts of their lives and have this almost like another dimension, in another part of the house.
Well, I think we're over the next few days, it's going to be quite interesting. He has now given apparently a dossier to the FBI, and the FBI got this dossier about his offending behaviour, and what they're going to look at is to say, where's it developed and how did it start? Don't forget, this is a person with his wife that set out on that morning to abduct a child. I doubt very much they chose her in particular. She just happened to be there at that time. Jaycee was picked up and abducted and taken away. It was then that they start to create these two segments of their life, their normal life that they were seen by other people, and then of course their life where they kept Jaycee, and then eventually obviously he fathers the children.
And in those terms, and I know this is outside your direct remit, but I mean the damage done to her, and let's not forget 2 children now who are facing the outside world for the first time. I mean, is there any hope of them actually being rehabilitated or brought into a so-called normal life?
Well, it's very difficult to know. I mean, these are so bizarre, these are cases. I mean, I was in the States last week talking about child abductions to law enforcement officers. They have 60 abductions a year by strangers. We have 6 in the UK. So you can see how absolutely rare these cases are, and in very few circumstances do children ever turn up again. This child now, or as adult now, is going to need to try and work back in with the family. What's of course is incredible is that these parents now, they're now grandparents. They've got children of their own.
And the stepfather actually was still a suspect, or questions being raised about him still.
Until recently, in fact, he was considered a fairly strong suspect by a number of local people within the abduction. And indeed, in fact, last year they went and searched a priest's house who they considered to be. So the FBI have never dropped this. There's always been a focus on this.
Just looking at this man, Garrido, as you said, obviously a previous history which the police eventually picked up. But again, he had apparently an internet blog called Voices Revealed. I'll just quote a little bit. Last blog, August the 14th. The Creator has given me the ability to speak in the tongues of angels in order to provide a wake-up call that will in time include the salvation of the entire world. Now, some would say, well, he's clearly a nutter. I mean, is that actually what that drives these people, that they are slightly unhinged, or is it just they have a strange sexual proclivity that alters their behaviour?
It's very difficult because, of course, without getting into their head, and you're never going to do that. I always use the analogy is that, you know, the normal person would walk into a bar and they might find attractive a young lady or a young man. These people walk into a bar or location, they find children attractive. They work on a completely different level than us. I think what's interesting in relation to him as an offender is, of course, he didn't work in isolation. He worked with his wife, and his wife was very much part of that. We really don't understand the way females offend, I think, to a great deal, because there's not a great deal of research that's been done. But when we look at Fritzl, you know, there was a great concern to say, well, how did she not know what was going on in relation to that house? This lady clearly knew, and she was part of the abduction. We know that because the identification fits them that was given in the early days. She's lived this life with him. Now, whether she's lived it as an offender or whether she's lived it in order for him to commit his offences and please him, we don't know at this stage.
And again, the question about the power and the control element, like Fritzl.
It is power and control. There is a huge sexual element in this. Any sexual offences has a sexual element, but we can't underestimate the power and the control that these people have. And don't forget, they are adults. These are children, and the two young children that he's fathered, they won't know anything different.
No, and obviously the authorities hoping to try and get them back on the right track. Mark, as ever, thanks for coming in and giving us your expert opinion.